So what happened? Why do so many intelligent, strong, awakened women still feel lost? Because the goddess within you has been buried for too long under layers of societal expectations, the roles of wife, mother, the good woman. The instinctual wild emotions, desires, and rebelliousness have been turned into something shameful, suppressed and silenced by culture and upbringing. The result, you live by your social self, the persona, but forget your true soul, the self. And then the darkness begins to rise. It shows up in uncontrollable anger, vague jealousy, and the constant feeling of never being good enough. Jung called this the shadow, and for every woman this darkness is not something to eliminate, it's a guide. There is a paradox that even many women rarely notice. The more she tries to become the ideal woman by society's standards, the further she drifts from her true essence. She may be a devoted mother, a caring wife, an outstanding coworker, a dutiful daughter, but inside, her soul is slowly withering. Jung called this phenomenon persona inflation, when the social self-persona becomes so bloated it completely overshadows the authentic being. And for modern women, that inflation often takes the shape of the ideal woman, always gentle, always kind, never complains, never rebels. A goddess of light who has lost the depth of her own shadow. As a child, you were once wild, innocent, alive. You sang for no reason. You got angry when you were ignored. You cried for things no one else could understand. But slowly you were taught to be good, to be pleasing, to fit in. You learned to hide your sadness, shrink your dreams, silence your true voice. And so, you began to separate from your soul. A woman does not lose herself because she is foolish. She loses herself because she is so intelligent, so capable of adapting to what society demands. She no longer knows what emotions are truly hers and which desires were programmed by her environment. Her deepest wound is not betrayal by others, it is the silent betrayal of her own self. Jung once wrote, "Modern man is sick because he has lost all connection with the images of the unconscious." In other words, today's woman is not in pain because she is weak. She is in pain because she has been severed from the sacred within her, from her primordial, instinctual, emotional, wild feminine essence. The emptiness you feel is not your fault. It is the silent cry of your soul calling you back home. But to hear that cry, you must pause. You must dare to look into the deepest part of your mind, where all the pieces of you that were once rejected still wait. You might sense this through subtle but persistent signs. You're always tired even when you haven't done much. You feel disconnected from those you love. You don't really know what you want anymore. You cry easily. You get angry, but you don't know why. This doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means you've been living too long without being fully yourself. And this is where healing begins. When you finally admit, "I am no longer myself." When a woman says that not in her mind but from her heart, an invisible door opens. Not a door to light, but to the movement of the shadow. You don't need to know the next step. You only need to stop and say, "There is a part of me that is slowly dying, and I don't want to go on like this anymore." Jung called that moment the call of the self, a signal from the unconscious whispering, "It's time to come home." If the shadow is the rejected part of your soul, then artificial light is the far greater danger. In today's culture, where every pain is labeled something to overcome quickly, women are encouraged to heal not by looking into the wound, but by covering it up. Morning yoga, 5-minute meditations, journaling with positive affirmations. These can be powerful tools, but only if they're not being used to avoid the darkness. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Yet that darkness is terrifying. It's the home of unspoken rage, of forbidden desire, labeled wrong, of ancient wounds never acknowledged. And because we fear it, we reach for fast healing, like it's a new mask, a spiritual mask this time. In therapy, I've met many women who thought they were healed. They'd read dozens of spiritual books, attended self-growth workshops, but when someone touched an old wound, they reacted like an abandoned child. They screamed. They withdrew. Or worse, they went numb. That's not healing. That's avoidance with lipstick. Jung called this the inflation of the spiritual persona. When the ego fuses with an exalted image of itself so completely, it loses all connection to its real shadow. At that point, the woman is no longer herself. She is a spiritualized version of herself. She speaks words of light, but her eyes are lost. She smiles more, but her heart is further away than ever. Let's be clear, spirituality is not the enemy. Yoga is not the enemy. Meditation is not the enemy. But when these are used to avoid real pain, they become a wall that blocks your descent into the shadow, the very place where true transformation lies. You cannot positivity your way through what you refuse to face. A woman cannot truly love herself if she still secretly hates her weakness, her anger, her desire, her rebellion. That is the shadow. And shadow, according to Jung, is not just evil. It is anything you refuse to accept about yourself. For women, it could be the desire to outshine others, sexual longing, silenced by shame, jealousy, pride, all locked away because we were taught a woman shouldn't be like that. But anything repressed too long will eventually rise through uncontrollable anger, manipulation, envy, numbness, or worse, through a false awakening where you think you've become enlightened, but you're simply acting out a new, more refined spiritual role. The journey home to yourself begins with one painful question: what am I using to escape? Maybe you're using light to hide your shadow. Maybe you're using maturity to never face the child inside you, the one still waiting to be held. Maybe you're using spirituality to avoid ever really feeling your pain. And only when you dare to admit that without judgment, without fleeing, can the real journey begin. No shortcuts, no bypasses. Only one road straight through the darkness. That is courage. That is honesty. And that is the first step of individuation, the process Jung believed to be the true goal of life, to become yourself fully, fiercely, and full of contradictions. The shadow is not just the darkness you must confront. It is the gateway to your forgotten soul. Within every woman lives a goddess in exile. She is instinct. She is sacred. She is wild. And she has been buried for generations by culture, by religion, by society. Think of Lilith, the first woman in ancient myth, who refused to submit to Adam and was cast into the shadows. Or Persephone, the maiden, dragged into the underworld only to rise again as queen of the dead. These are not just myths. They are living metaphors of the feminine soul. Jung called them archetypes, primordial images that live deep within the collective unconscious. The shadow is not what you should fear. What's truly frightening is how long you've lived not knowing that this sacred part of you has been waiting to be remembered. A woman once told me through tears, "I feel something so powerful inside me, but I'm afraid to let it out. I'm scared I'll lose everything: my husband, my control, even myself." And I gently replied, "You're not afraid of losing yourself. You're afraid of finally finding her. She is not alone. She is one of millions of women still living as an unreturned Persephone pulled into the soul's underworld, yet unaware that this descent is where her true power awaits. If the shadow holds your repressed instincts, then the inner goddess is the sacred consciousness that has fallen asleep. And to awaken her, you can't bypass. You can't fake healing. You can't simply read about it. You must live through it. You must feel. You must fall. You must shatter. This is what Jung called individuation, the sacred union of dark and light, instinct and awareness, persona, and self. For a woman, individuation means not only facing the shadow, but crowning the goddess within. She may be a Lilith howling after a lifetime of forced sweetness, a Kali raging with the anger you were told to suppress, an Isis gathering the shattered pieces of your soul, preparing for rebirth. Do you recognize these symbols stirring inside you? You don't need to become a goddess. You just need to remember she never left. She's simply been locked away in the very shadow you feared to face. If you've ever felt something powerful trapped inside you, strange dreams of fire, water, and darkness, like you're only half alive, quick to cry, quick to rage, then judging yourself for it, know this: your soul is demanding a voice. You are not crazy, you are awakening. This journey isn't for everyone, but if you're still watching, a part of you may already be ready. Have you ever met your own Lilith or Persephone? Share your story in the comments. Don't hold back. Your voice might become a mirror for someone else's soul. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and let's dive deeper into the symbolic path where Jung and soul meet. We cannot heal by avoiding the wound. We can only heal by entering it. Jung called this the descensus ad inferos, the soul's descent into the underworld. Not to be imprisoned, but to retrieve the lost fragments of the self. For a woman, this journey is never linear. It spirals. It loops. Each step brings tears, memories, and buried pieces of who she used to be. But the real question is, where do we begin? Not by changing the world, but by being radically honest with ourselves. Step 1. Listen to what you've been avoiding. Every time you feel a surge of anger over something small, every time you envy someone but hide it behind politeness, every time you see a bold woman and feel a subtle sting of judgment rise up, these are clues from the shadow, not to shame you, but to remind you there are parts of you still unloved, unseen, unheard. Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You'll be ruled by what you refuse to face until you look it in the eye. Try this. For one day, write down every strong emotion you feel, especially the negative ones. Don't analyze, just write. After 1 week, look back. You may just hear the shadow's voice and glimpse the first truth of your soul. Step 2, befriend your dreams. Dreams are the portal between consciousness and the unconscious. For Jung, they are the language of the soul. They don't speak in logic, but in symbols. Have you dreamed of being chased, of getting lost, falling into a void? Have you seen blood fire mirrors or the dead? These are not nightmares. They are invitations. Dreams are never your enemy. They're always reaching for wholeness. Start recording them, even fragments, even a single image. Then ask what part of me is trying to speak. Step 3, dialogue with your shadow. This is what Jung called active imagination. Close your eyes. Imagine sitting across from a part of yourself you've always denied. She might be the jealous woman, the rebellious girl, the crying child who was abandoned. Ask her, what do you want from me? How long have you been waiting? Listen without judgment. This is the most radical act you can offer your soul, because when the shadow is heard, it no longer needs to sabotage. Step 4, express through image, through art, through body. Shadow doesn't speak in words. It lives in images, in movement, in sensation. So paint, dance, cry, write. You don't need to be an artist. You just need to be honest. Draw something strange. Write a letter to your rage. Scream alone in your car. Write a poem about a dream. These are rituals, personal rites of passage where the shadow becomes your ally. And finally, be compassionate with the process. Healing is not a straight line. There will be days you shine like the sun and days you sink into fog. Both are sacred because you are not climbing upward, you are returning. And that return back to the feminine soul, back to the self, is the deepest gift you can give yourself. If some part of you sees yourself in this journey, comment below, I am ready to walk into the darkness. Declare it to your soul. And if you want to go deeper into the feminine archetypes, active imagination, and shadow work, subscribe to the channel. Because this is only the beginning. When you've walked through the darkness, touched your wounds, spoken with your shadow, and listened to your dreams, you don't become someone new, you return. Not to your old self, but to a deeper self, a more whole self, where light and shadow coexist in peace. Carl Jung once said, "The tree that reaches to heaven must send its roots down to hell." Nowhere is that more true than in a woman's journey. Only when you meet the goddess within that wild, primal, emotional, sacred force, do you finally realize you were never weak. You were simply never given permission to be fully yourself. And that goddess, she may not appear with blinding light. She may arrive in a dream, or in a strange but peaceful morning, in a painting you couldn't control, in a single moment when you stop trying and simply breathe. Integration is not about forcing positivity. It's about allowing the divine and the primal to exist together. You can be both strong and soft, both loving and angry, both nurturing and hungry for freedom. The inner goddess does not ask you to be perfect. She only asks that you sit down, pause, and listen. Integration is the end of the inner war. It's when you can see the shadow and no longer fear it, see the light and no longer need to prove it. It's when you stand in the center of emotional chaos and know you are the observer. This is sacred work. It has no end. But it has a threshold, a moment Jung called self-realization. The moment you stop searching outside and look inward, to find the temple of your own soul, where no teaching is wiser than your felt truth, no promise brighter than your gaze, no method stronger than your full presence. And here you discover a paradox. You were never looking for yourself, because you never lost her. You only lost contact. You only fell asleep in a dream made of expectations, roles, shoulds, and shouldn'ts. So now, close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and ask, if today I stop pleasing everyone, if I stop trying to be better, who would I be? Maybe the answer hasn't come, but in the silence after that question, that's her. That's the goddess. If you've stayed with me until now, chances are you've already heard it, that whisper. Not from this video, but from within you. It's the voice that's never stopped calling, even when you tried to silence it. A low, deep sound, not made of words, but always present. You don't need anyone to guide you back to yourself, because your soul has always known the way. Everything you've heard in this video wasn't meant to fill your mind with more theory. It was meant to call back something you already knew. Before you became the ideal woman, before the roles, before the word healing ever meant anything to you, you already touched your true self. In a small moment, a glance, a dream, a burst of anger that was real, a laugh that escaped before you could control it. Those moments were not random. They were soul memories. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to share the things that seem most meaningful to you." Maybe what you feel isn't lack of love, but that you've never been fully loved as all of you, the beautiful and the broken, the powerful and the fragile, the light and the shadow. We didn't come to Earth to be perfect. We came to be real. And the realest thing about us is that we are full of contradictions. You can be a healer and still feel rage. You can be loving and still feel jealous. You can be awakening and still want to give up some days. And that doesn't make you less. It makes you more human and more sacred. If something in this video made you shiver, made you breathe a little deeper, or brought tears to your eyes, don't explain it. Just write it down in the comments, even just a few words. Let it be a small ritual to mark this moment. I have begun to return. And if you feel the need for a space to keep walking this path, subscribe. Not because you need more knowledge, but because you deserve a safe space to slowly remember who you really are. Here we don't teach each other how to become goddesses. We simply remind each other the goddess never left.